My name is Paula Everett, 29 years old. The first weeks after giving birth were supposed to be filled with quiet joy, the kind of warmth that wraps around you when you realize you've created a new life. Instead, I found myself counting the seconds of silence between my husband's words, measuring how far his heart had drifted from me. Michael used to hum while making coffee in the mornings. Now even the sound of the machine grinding beans seemed too loud for him. He'd sit at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone, not looking at me, not looking at our son. When I placed our baby in his arms, he'd flinch, not in disgust but in fear, as if holding proof of something he didn't want to face. At first, I told myself he was overwhelmed. Men often are after the baby arrives, I'd read. Hormones, pressure, lack of sleep. It all changes people. But the way he avoided my touch, the way his eyes darted away when I smiled, was different. It wasn't exhaustion, it was suspicion. We were staying at my in-laws' house, a place that had always felt like a second home. His mother, gentle and composed, tried to act normal. She'd hand me soup fuss over the baby and glance at Michael as though waiting for him to apologize for some invisible offense. His father, stern but kind, rarely spoke. But when he did, his tone had lost its usual warmth. Something hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. One afternoon, as I rocked my son by the window, Michael's mother approached me with a hesitant smile. "He's been different lately," she whispered, eyes shifting toward the hallway where Michael's footsteps echoed faintly. "Ever since that dinner with Brian, he's been tense. Maybe you two should talk." I wanted to ask what dinner she meant, but before I could, the baby stirred and started crying. By the time I calmed him, Michael had left the house without saying goodbye. That night, I waited for him. The clock ticked past midnight, each sound sharp and intrusive. When he finally came home, the smell of whiskey lingered on him, faint but bitter. He dropped his keys on the table and sat across from me, his face unreadable. "We need to talk," I said softly, my voice trembling despite the hours I'd rehearsed it in my head. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the floor, then looked up at me with a gaze so cold it made my chest tighten. "I want a paternity test," he said flatly. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "A what?" He clenched his jaw. "For the baby. I need to know if he's mine." The words didn't make sense. My mind rejected them before they could land. "Michael." I whispered, my pulse thudding in my ears. "Are you saying you think I cheated on you?" He didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't even blink. "You and Brian," he said quietly. "I've seen how close you two are." I froze. Brian. His brother. The man who'd introduced us. The man who had been like family long before the ring on my finger. "That's insane," I said, my voice breaking into a whisper. "You're accusing me of sleeping with your own brother." He stood up, breathing hard, running a hand through his hair as if trying to steady his thoughts. "Just take the test," he said. "If it proves me wrong, then fine. But I can't." I cut him off standing too. "You can't what?" "Trust me. After 4 years of marriage and a child, you can't even look at me without thinking I'm lying to you." The baby started crying again from the other room, his tiny wail slicing through the air between us. Neither of us moved. Michael rubbed his temples, muttering, "I just need to be sure." I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "You already were sure, until you decided not to be." He turned away, his shoulders tense, his silence saying everything. I realized then that the man I'd trusted more than anyone, the man who had promised to protect me, had become my accuser. And in that moment, as my son's cries filled the hallway, I felt something inside me begin to shatter. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dent in the pillow where Michael used to rest his head. He had left early for work, or so I thought. His toothbrush was gone, his watch too. It was the first time since our wedding that he hadn't kissed me goodbye. I looked down at my son swaddled in soft blue, his tiny chest rising and falling. The innocence in his face mocked the chaos around us. I couldn't understand how Michael could look at this child and see doubt instead of himself. When he finally returned that evening, I was ready. I needed answers. "Why, Michael?" I asked quietly as he stepped through the door. "Why would you even think something like that?" He sighed, dropped his briefcase, and leaned against the counter. "Because I heard something. Weeks ago." "What did you hear?" He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "That night we had dinner with your old college friends, the one where Brian came over too. I was outside getting some air, and I overheard Brian talking to your friend Greg." The name hit me like a pebble against glass, small but cracking everything it touched. "They were laughing," he continued. "Greg said everyone back in college thought you and Brian would end up together. Brian didn't deny it. He just laughed and said, 'Yeah, I thought so too,' until Michael came along." I blinked, trying to absorb his words. "That's it. That's what you based all of this on. His voice rose. He admitted it. Paula, he admitted he had feelings for you. That was years ago, I shot back. Before you and I even started dating. You can't. I can't what? Feel like a fool. He slammed his hand on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. He hid it from me. You hid it from me. Both of you made me feel like an idiot in my own marriage. The baby's cry broke through our shouting, piercing, and raw. I rushed to pick him up, holding him close, rocking him as tears spilled down my cheeks. You're not making sense, I whispered, my voice trembling. Brian's feelings, whatever they were, don't mean I return them. Michael's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, then hardened again. I just want the truth. You already have it, I said bitterly, but you're too proud to believe it. He walked past me, muttering, then take the test. If you're innocent, what's the problem? I turned to face him, heart pounding, because the moment I agree, I'm admitting there's even a reason to doubt me. You're asking me to prove something that should already be sacred. He looked at me with cold detachment, as though the woman in front of him was a stranger. If there's nothing to hide, it shouldn't matter. That sentence hit me harder than any insult could. I stared at him, unable to breathe. You really think I'm capable of that? He didn't answer. He just walked toward the door, his shadow stretching long across the hallway floor. I never cheated on you, I said, my voice low but sharp, not even in thought. You're destroying everything we built because you can't control your jealousy. He stopped at the doorway, his back still turned. Maybe we never built anything real to begin with. And then he left. The house fell silent again, except for the baby's soft whimper and my own uneven breathing. I didn't remember how long I sat there clutching my son and staring at the door, but by dawn I knew I couldn't stay. I packed a small bag, diapers, milk, one blanket, my phone charger. The sound of the zipper closing felt final, like sealing away what was left of my marriage. Outside, the world was still damp from the night rain. I walked down the driveway with my baby in my arms, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I'll protect you, I murmured, even if it's just us now. I didn't know where to go. My parents lived states away. My friends would ask too many questions. And Brian. God, I couldn't even think about Brian. So I went to the only place I thought might still open its doors for me, Michael's parents. When I rang their bell at sunrise, his mother appeared almost instantly, as though she'd been waiting all night. Her eyes widened when she saw me, then softened with something between pity and guilt. Paula, she whispered, come in, dear. Her voice was kind, too kind. And that was when I realized she already knew. Michael's mother, Elaine, led me inside with quiet urgency, glancing toward the staircase, as though afraid someone might overhear us. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and detergent, a scent I had always associated with safety. But today it felt foreign, like stepping into a place that remembered happier versions of me. Sit down, dear, she said softly, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. You look exhausted. I didn't argue. My legs trembled as I sank into the chair, clutching my son against my chest. The warm light from the kitchen window made him squint, his tiny hand brushing my collarbone. Elaine poured me tea before speaking again. I know, Paula. He told us what he said. I froze. Then you know he accused me. Her eyes filled with shame. Yes, and we are mortified. Michael's father is furious. He hasn't been himself lately. None of us can make sense of this. Before I could reply, footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and heavy. Michael's father, Charles, entered, towering and silent, the kind of man whose disapproval filled a room before his words did. His face was pale with restrained anger. He's lost his damn mind, Charles muttered, setting his newspaper down with a thud. My own son accusing his wife of adultery with his brother. Elaine shot him a warning look, nodding toward the baby. But Charles didn't stop. He's embarrassed the whole family. Do you hear me, Paula? I won't tolerate this kind of nonsense. I don't know what's happening to him, I whispered, trying not to cry again. He used to be gentle, thoughtful. It's like he's someone else. Charles sighed, rubbing his temple. Ever since that dinner with Brian, something broke inside him. He's convinced himself of things that aren't real. There it was again, that dinner. I wanted to ask what exactly had happened, but Elaine touched my arm first. You can stay here as long as you need, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. You and the baby are safe here. For the first time in days, I let myself exhale. Hours passed quietly. I fed my son, tried to rest, and listened to the muffled conversation between Elaine and Charles in the next room. Their voices rose and fell in rhythm, anger, disbelief, and finally resolve. By afternoon, they came back into the kitchen, their faces grim but united. We've decided something, Charles said. Michael needs to learn the cost of his words. I frowned. What do you mean? Elaine placed a gentle hand over mine. He's supposed to take over the family business soon, but we're not handing it to him, not until he apologizes and makes this right. I blinked. You're cutting him off. Temporarily, Charles said. He's left us no choice. Maybe losing his privilege will force him to think clearly. Something about the plan made my stomach twist. It wasn't just punishment, it was control. And though part of me felt vindicated, another part feared that escalating the tension could backfire. Please, I murmured, don't do this because of me. Elaine shook her head firmly. We're doing it because of him. He needs to face reality before he destroys his life. The decision was final. They would tell Michael that Brian, not he, would inherit the textile company. It was a bluff meant to scare him, but I could already imagine the explosion it would trigger. Still, I was too drained to argue. That night, after putting my baby to sleep, I sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the garden lights flicker. The night air carried faint traces of rain and blooming jasmine. For the first time in weeks, I felt still, though not safe. Elaine joined me, quietly holding 2 cups of cocoa. Paula, she said, her voice low, I need you to promise me something. What is it? Don't talk to Brian yet, not until things calm down. Why, I asked. She hesitated. Because Michael's mind is fragile right now. Seeing you with his brother, even by accident, would destroy what little reason he has left. Her words sent a chill through me. You make it sound like he's dangerous. I don't know what he is anymore, she admitted, eyes glistening. But I'm afraid of what he might become. We sat in silence, sipping our cocoa as the crickets sang. Somewhere inside the house, the baby stirred, and I went to check on him. His tiny fist gripped my finger, anchoring me to a kind of hope I couldn't name. But peace was short-lived. The next evening, as we were finishing dinner, the house phone rang. Elaine picked it up, her face paling as soon as she heard the voice on the other end. She mouthed, It's him. I took the receiver with trembling hands. Michael. His voice came through ragged and furious. So this is what you wanted. To turn my own parents against me. What are you talking about? Don't play innocent, Paula. You went to them, didn't you? Told them I'm some kind of monster, and now they're cutting me off, handing everything to Brian. What is that your plan? You and him taking everything while I'm left with nothing. I stood frozen, the phone pressed against my ear, my heart racing. Michael, that's not true. What he snapped. They just happened to turn on me right after you moved in. You think I'm that stupid? His voice cracked into a strangled laugh that didn't sound like him at all. I see you now, he whispered. You're not the woman I married. He stopped himself, then hissed, You'll regret this. The line went dead. I stood there in the kitchen, the dial tone humming in my ear, my hand trembling so violently I almost dropped the phone. Behind me, Elaine gasped softly. Charles muttered something I couldn't hear. But all I could think about was that final sentence, cold, shaking, venomous. You'll regret this. The night after that call, I barely slept. Every sound, the creak of the stairs, the hum of the fridge, made my body tense like prey expecting a predator. I knew Michael wouldn't show up at his parents' house unannounced, but the thought of his voice, that venom, still echoed in my head. By morning, I looked like someone else entirely. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, hair matted from running my hands through it too many times. Elaine tried to coax me into eating, but I couldn't taste anything. I just kept replaying his words. You'll regret this. 2 days passed. No call, no text. Then a message came short, sharp, and cruel. Enjoy my family while you can. Let's see how long before they see who you really are. I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at it until the letters blurred, then deleted it. But deleting didn't make it disappear from my mind. That afternoon, I sat in the nursery with my son in my lap. His breathing was soft, steady, safe. I whispered, You don't deserve this chaos, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. When Elaine walked in quietly, I didn't notice until she placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You're shaking, she murmured. Come downstairs. Your father-in-law wants to talk. I followed her hesitant. Charles was at the table with a thick folder in front of him, papers, contracts, and what looked like a bank statement. Paula, he said, voice heavy, we're cutting Michael off for real. No more bluffing. I blinked. I thought you were only pretending to. He called last night, Charles interrupted. Accused us of conspiring with you, with Brian. Said we were all thieves. Elaine sighed, her hands trembling around her teacup. He's spiraling. We wanted to scare him straight, not break him. I looked between them, heart pounding. Maybe you should talk to him, not punish him. He's not thinking clearly. Charles shook his head. If he wants to destroy himself, I won't stop him. But I won't let him drag you down too. Their loyalty both comforted and frightened me. I felt protected, but also trapped inside a war I hadn't declared. That night, I stepped out to the garden, the cold air stinging my cheeks. The scent of wet soil hung in the air. I sat on the stone bench beneath the oak tree, the same place Michael and I had once taken family photos. The ghost of his laughter echoed faintly in my memory, cruel in its contrast to the silence now. I whispered into the wind, "When did you stop loving me?" The next day, I decided to call my parents. I had avoided it, afraid of their disappointment. But when my mother answered, her voice broke the dam I'd been holding inside. "Mom," I sobbed. "He doesn't believe our son is his. He thinks I cheated with his brother." There was silence. Then her steady voice came through. "Come home, Paula." "I can't," I said quickly. "It's complicated. I'm with his parents, they've been helping. But I can't stay here forever." She hesitated. "What about Michael?" I closed my eyes. "He's gone, Mom. Even if he's still breathing, he's gone." That night, after putting my son to sleep, I sat with Elaine and Charles again. Their plan hadn't worked. Michael wasn't remorseful, he was unraveling. And for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, too. "We think he's been drinking heavily," Elaine said quietly. "Brian tried to check on him yesterday, but he wouldn't open the door. He just shouted through it." My heart twisted. "Then we need to get him help." Charles looked at me sternly. "You need to protect yourself first. He's unpredictable right now. We'll handle him." The words "protect yourself" lingered long after I went to bed. But protecting myself didn't feel like strength anymore. It felt like surrender. I started writing a message to Michael. I wanted to say, "I still love you, but you're killing us." I wanted to ask, "How did we get here?" I wanted to remind him of the man who used to dance with me in our tiny apartment kitchen when we couldn't afford dinner. But I didn't send it. I deleted every word. The following morning, I found a letter on the doorstep. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper weighed down by a small rock. My heart skipped as I recognized his handwriting. "You've turned everyone against me, even my parents, even Brian. I know what you're doing, Paula. You want me gone so you can have everything. You win. I'm done fighting. You'll get what you want soon." My hands shook. I read it again, then again. The phrasing "you'll get what you want soon" wasn't clear, but it sounded final. I called Elaine immediately. She read it in silence, her face draining of color. Charles grabbed his coat. "I'm going to find him." He drove off, leaving behind the kind of silence that presses against your chest. Hours passed. Dusk fell. Then his car returned. Charles walked inside, looking older than I'd ever seen him. He sank into the couch and whispered, "He's alive, but barely. He'd been drinking all day. I called a friend at the clinic. He's under observation." Elaine covered her mouth, sobbing softly. I didn't cry. I just stood there numb, because somehow I already knew this was where it was heading. Later, after they went upstairs, I sat beside my sleeping son, tracing the outline of his tiny hand with my finger. His world was still simple milk warmth comfort. Mine had turned into a battlefield. I whispered, "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I finally realized I had to love myself more. The morning light cut through the curtains like thin knives, sharp and deliberate. My decision from the night before hadn't faded with sleep. It had settled deeper like ink soaking into paper. I was done waiting for apologies that would never come. After breakfast, Charles called from the hospital to tell us that Michael had been discharged. "He's sober now," he said, "but not stable. I don't know what's going on inside his head anymore." Elaine sighed, pressing a trembling hand to her temple. "He's my son, Charles. I can't just give up on him." "You won't," I said quietly, "but I will." She looked up at me, startled. "Paula, I'm filing for divorce. Today." There was a long silence. Then finally she nodded. Maybe that's the only way he'll understand what he's lost. Before heading to the lawyer's office, I made one more call to Brian. He didn't answer the first time. On the second, his voice was tight and uneasy. "Paula, is he bothering you again?" "No," I said, though my voice wavered. "I need to talk about what started all this." He paused. "You mean what he overheard?" "Yes." A breath long and heavy came through the line. "Meet me at the cafe on Elm, please." The cafe was nearly empty, the smell of roasted beans clinging to the air. When Brian walked in, he looked different, like he'd aged 10 years in a week. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. The confident, easygoing man I'd once known was gone. He sat across from me without meeting my eyes. "I've been expecting this," he murmured. "Then tell me everything," I said. No half-truths this time. He rubbed his face with both hands before answering. "That night, the dinner Michael heard more than I told him. Greg and I were talking about college. He joked that everyone thought we'd end up together. I laughed, yeah, but then I said something I shouldn't have. I said, I thought so too until Michael came along. My breath caught. So it's true. Brian nodded, his jaw tightening. Yeah, I had feelings for you back then. Still did maybe a little even after you married him. But I never acted on them. Never. You have to believe me. I stared down at my hands, words trapped behind my teeth. He heard that I whispered. All of it. He confronted me right after. Told me he'd never forgive me if I told you. I promised I wouldn't. I thought he just needed time. And instead I said bitterly, he let it rot inside him. Brian's eyes glistened. I never meant to hurt either of you. I thought keeping quiet was the kinder thing to do. Kinder, I snapped. You let your brother destroy his marriage because you were too afraid to admit the truth. Heads turned from nearby tables, but I didn't care. I leaned forward, my voice low but burning. You both made me live in the shadow of your guilt. You should have told me years ago. He looked like he wanted to reach for my hand but stopped himself. Paula, if I could take it back. You can't, I said coldly. You both chose silence, and now I'm paying for it. I stood up to leave, but his voice stopped me. He's not well, Paula, Brian said. It's more than jealousy. He's been seeing things, hearing things that aren't there. I tried to get him to see someone before it got this bad. That made me pause. You knew. I suspected. He'd call me late at night asking if I'd been talking to you, if we were planning something. At first I thought it was just anger, but then his voice broke. He started saying he could hear your voice when you weren't home, laughing, whispering his name. A chill crawled down my spine. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think you'd believe me, he said quietly, and I didn't want to make things worse between you. Worse, I let out a bitter laugh. There's nothing left to make worse. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe hum faded into the distance, and I realized how far from normal my life had drifted. Paula, he said softly, I'm sorry. Don't be, I replied. Be honest for once. That's what you both owed me. I turned and walked out, my reflection flickering briefly in the cafe's glass door. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. That evening, I returned to the house. Elaine was in the living room holding my baby while watching the news, but her eyes weren't really on the screen. Did you see him? She asked. No, I said, my voice flat. I saw Brian. Her lips tightened. Ah. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. I just sat beside her and took my son into my arms. He smiled a small, unknowing smile that broke something in me. I filed the papers, I whispered. Elaine placed her hand over mine. Good. It's time to protect your peace, Paula. But as I rocked my baby to sleep that night, Brian's words echoed in my mind. He's been seeing things, hearing things. Somewhere inside that madness, love had curdled into fear, fear into obsession, and now obsession into ruin. And I realized that what scared me most wasn't losing Michael. It was wondering how much of the man I loved had ever really been there at all. The next few days blurred together, lawyers' documents, endless signatures that made my hands ache. Each page I signed felt like another quiet burial. The death of a promise. The end of a version of myself I no longer recognized. Michael didn't call, didn't show up. I thought maybe he'd accepted it. But then one evening my phone buzzed with a number I still knew by heart. I hesitated before answering. Paula. His voice was hoarse, fragile, like a cracked record. You filed for divorce. I closed my eyes. Yes. A long pause. Then, you couldn't just take the test, could you? You had to destroy everything. My throat tightened. This isn't about a test anymore, Michael. It's about trust, and you lost it. He gave a shaky laugh, the sound hollow. You think you're the only one hurting. You think I wanted any of this. Then why did you start it? I snapped. Why accuse me of sleeping with your brother? Why let your paranoia eat our marriage alive? Because I heard him say he loved you, he shouted. Because every time I looked at you, I saw the two of you laughing in my head. I couldn't stop it. The silence that followed was heavy and endless. Michael, I said quietly, you need help, real help. Another pause. Then his tone softened into something that almost sounded like shame. I already did. What do you mean? I saw a psychologist a few weeks ago, after you left. My breath caught, and they diagnosed me, he said, his voice trembling. Severe anxiety disorder, obsessive jealousy. They said it's been building for years. I didn't even notice it. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence between us. So this I began. All of this was because you were sick. I don't know, he whispered. I just know I wasn't thinking right. I kept seeing signs that weren't there. I thought I was protecting myself from losing you, but I was the one who destroyed everything. My chest ached, but not with pity, something heavier, something like grief. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. I couldn't face you, he said. You already saw me as the enemy, and I thought maybe you'd be better off without me. Don't say that, I murmured automatically, though part of me knew it was true. He exhaled long and uneven. I lost my job, Paula. I haven't been eating. I don't even know who I am anymore. My parents hate me. My brother won't answer my calls. You're all I had left. The desperation in his voice cracked something inside me, but I stayed quiet. Please, he said finally, don't take my son away from me. I hesitated. You didn't even ask about him until now. I couldn't, he said, his voice breaking. I was afraid he wouldn't look like me. That was the final blow. I felt something cold and sharp slice through my chest. I hope, I whispered, one day you realize what you've done. Not just to me, but to yourself. He didn't answer. The line went dead, leaving only the hum of the rain. Later that night, Elaine and Charles came to my room. They had heard from Michael's doctor. It's true, Charles said, his voice flat. He's been diagnosed. The psychiatrist says his anxiety became severe during your pregnancy. That's when the hallucinations started. Elaine sat beside me, her eyes glistening. He was hiding it from everyone, even Brian. I stared at them numb, and now, they've started him on medication, Charles said. Therapy too, but it'll take time. I looked down at my hands, the divorce papers resting on my lap. Time won't fix this. Elaine reached for me. He's not evil, Paula. He's sick. I know, I said softly, but sickness doesn't erase what he said, or how he made me feel. Silence filled the room. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low and unending. For the next few days, I existed in a strange fog, half mourning, half relief. I'd wake up to my baby's cries and feel grateful he was too young to remember any of this. Sometimes I'd catch myself missing the sound of Michael's laugh or the warmth of his hand on my back. But then I'd remember his voice demanding proof that our child was his, and the longing would disappear. When the divorce papers were finalized, I didn't cry. Not because I didn't care, but because there was nothing left to cry about. He didn't contest custody. He didn't even show up to court. The lawyer handed me the signed decree with a sympathetic look. It's over, he said. But the truth was, it wasn't. Not really. Because pieces of Michael still lingered everywhere, the way the baby smiled with his dimple, the coffee mug he'd left behind, the phantom sound of his keys at the door. That night, Elaine came to me again, holding a small envelope. He wanted me to give you this, she said quietly. Inside was a single piece of paper. Michael's handwriting was uneven, trembling. I know I can't undo what I've done. I wish I could see our son grow up, but I don't deserve it yet. Maybe someday when I'm better, I'll try to explain. Until then, please tell him his father loved him, even if his mind couldn't show it. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into a drawer I never opened again. Because love once infected by fear doesn't die quickly. It fades slowly, painfully, until what's left isn't love at all, just memory. 6 months have passed. Sometimes I measure time not in days, but in sounds, the first laugh of my son, the quiet hum of the washing machine at night, the birds that sing outside the window just before sunrise. Each small sound reminds me that life somehow continues. I'm still living with Michael's parents. It's strange, I know, but this house has become something like neutral ground, a place that holds all the wreckage, yet still offers safety. Elaine dotes on her grandson like he's the only thing keeping her breathing steady. Charles spends more time in the garden now, pruning roses that never seem to bloom. Maybe tending to something fragile gives him a sense of control he couldn't have with his sons. They don't talk about Michael much, though. Sometimes I catch Elaine standing in the hallway, staring at his old childhood photos. She always wipes her eyes quickly when she notices me watching. Brian visits occasionally. The first few times were awkward, two people bound by guilt and silence. But lately we've learned to speak without walking on glass. He brings formula toys, sometimes groceries, and always leaves quickly, as if afraid staying too long will reopen wounds that should be left to scar. Michael, meanwhile, has vanished from our daily lives. I hear updates only through Elaine's cautious whispers. He's still in therapy, still unemployed, living in a small apartment across town. He sends letters sometimes addressed to his parents, but never to me. I never ask to read them, and Elaine never offers. One evening, I joined Charles on the porch. He was staring at the horizon, the last streaks of sunset staining the sky crimson. Your divorce went through quietly, he said. You handled yourself with dignity. I wish my sons had half your strength. I smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. He sighed. Elaine and I decided something about the company. We're not passing it to either of them. I turned to him surprised. Not even Brian. He shook his head. He doesn't want it, and frankly, I don't trust either of them to preserve what I built. We're giving it to our senior manager. He's been loyal for 20 years. There was bitterness in his tone, but also release, like a man finally putting down a burden. I suppose that's fair, I said softly. Charles looked at me for a long moment. You know, when Michael first brought you home, Elaine said you'd be the one to keep him grounded. She wasn't wrong. You did everything you could. Don't carry his madness like it's your fault. I swallowed hard. Sometimes I wonder if loving him made me blind. He nodded. That's what love does. It lets you see someone as they could be, not as they are. We sat in silence after that, the night air thick with unspoken things. Later that week, Elaine approached me in the nursery. The baby was giggling at his reflection in the mirror, a sound so pure it felt almost sacred. She touched my arm gently. I wanted to tell you Michael wrote again. He's asked to see his son. My breath caught. What did you tell him? I said not yet, she whispered. He's still unstable. He needs to get better first. I nodded, my heart torn between compassion and fear. Part of me wanted to see him one last time to understand what was left of the man I'd loved. But another part, stronger, quieter, knew that reopening that door might undo everything I'd rebuilt. Maybe one day, I said finally, when our son is old enough to decide for himself. Elaine's eyes shimmered. You're a good mother, Paula. Maybe, I murmured. Or maybe I just learned the hard way what not to be. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stepped outside. The garden was still damp from an earlier rain. The wind carried the scent of earth and jasmine, the same scent that lingered the night Michael accused me. I walked to the oak tree and sat on the old stone bench, the same one where I once prayed for my marriage to survive. The moonlight shimmered on the wet leaves, and I realized something I hadn't before healing doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in quietly like dawn after a long night. I looked down at the small house behind me, Elaine reading by the window, my son asleep upstairs, and felt a strange peace settle over me. Michael would always be part of my story, but he no longer defined it. His illness, his jealousy, his destruction, they were chapters I'd survived, not the book itself. I tilted my face to the sky and whispered, I forgive you. Not for him, but for me. Because forgiveness, I've learned, is just another word for freedom. As the first birds began to stir, I rose and headed back inside. My son whimpered softly in his crib, and I soothed him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Sleep, my love, I whispered. We're safe now. And though the past would always linger like a shadow, I knew it no longer had claws. Because some wounds don't heal, they teach you where not to bleed again.